virus.
Thank you. Thank you. Edna, I'll ask Madam Edna to proceed.
Can I help you share the screen?
Yeah, just bring it up. Yeah.
Okay.
Are we good to go, Edna?
I'm just opening the document. We'll be ready in a few seconds. I think we're good.
Okay. We are good to go?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Apologies. Edna, you're not sharing the screen.
I've not shared the screen.
You're not sharing the PowerPoint. Just kindly wait just a moment. Let me stop it for you.
Okay.
Okay, try and share it now.
Okay, how's that?
Yeah, that's good now.
Okay.
Just make it.
Okay, are we good to go? I'll stick to my 20 minutes. Don't worry. Yeah. So my role this afternoon is to share some thoughts on the role of Parliament in budgeting and oversight, with particular reference to COVID-19 pandemic and other crises. My name is Fitzgerald Kateshi. I work in the Parliamentary Budget Office in the National Assembly of Zambia. So I'll start with a quote from some experts who work in the IMF regarding accountability during a crisis. They say, do whatever it takes, but make sure you keep the receipts. So as much as an emergency and—
Kindly move the PowerPoints. The PowerPoints are not.
Hello?
The quotation first.
Oh, the quotation. Oh, okay. So the quotation goes, whatever it takes. Do whatever it takes, but make sure you keep the receipts. So it's in line with the theme that emergencies require speed to be dealt with, but whatever it takes, make sure that we still keep the receipts for accountability, because nobody will listen when it's not an open check. So that's the quote in line with the discussion that is before the committee. So my budget outline, my presentation has got 6 main points, which I'll share. I'll briefly touch on parliamentary oversight, role of the Parliament in the budget process, overview on crises, then accountability challenges, oversight during a crisis. Then we'll end with sharing some thoughts on how oversight can be enhanced in time of when we are faced with a crisis. So to start with, oversight is one of the challenges, one of the functions of the legislature. Of course, the others being to legislate, and also the other being to be a representative of the constituents in the whole country. Now there's a description of oversight which I'm sharing. Of course, some people refer to this to refer mostly to presidential system, but I think that it contains quite important points that one should take note of when discussing parliamentary budget oversight. The first one is that oversight relates to overseeing that policy or including laws are implemented in accordance with the intentions, Secondly, is that to determine whether policy is effective and its impact is in accordance with what the parliamentary standards. Thirdly, to prevent waste and dishonesty, and to assure efficiency when executing these policies. Fourthly, to prevent discretionary abuse by office bearers. And lastly, to represent the public interests by monitoring and constraining the agency clientele group relations. So these are some of the points that we need to take into account when discussing parliamentary oversight. Then I just zero in on the case of our country in terms of what this oversight can be supported in form of legislation. The Constitution of Zambia requires Parliament to oversee the performance of the executive, and among the functions that are listed is to ensure equity in the distribution of national resources amongst the people, appropriating funds for public expenditure, scrutinizing public expenditure, approving public debt before it is contracted, and approving international agreements and treaties before these are acceded to or ratified. So even before we look at the standing orders with the specific details, we already have the constitutional mandate that Parliament is given in its oversight function. Now, the main issue in the discussion today is basically the role that Parliament will play both in budgeting and oversight. So in terms of the role that Parliament plays, traditionally, the visible stages are at the approval stage, and of course at the audit stage, when we receive reports of the Auditor General, and the public accounts is very active when scrutinizing them. But Parliament ideally, particularly in the new dispensation, should be involved at all these 4 stages of the budget process. I'll start with at the formulation stage. Most countries have adopted the medium-term planning and budgeting strategies. So at the formulation stage, most parliaments are given the opportunity to interrogate the medium-term expenditure frameworks. So in there, Parliament has got the opportunity to appreciate what the policies of the government are in the medium term, and in there brings in an opportunity to appreciate what the executive intends to deal with some of the issues that may be affecting a particular country. And in this case, we're looking at issues to do with a crisis or a pandemic like we have now, the COVID situation. So in the medium term, if it's particularly for recurring issues that affect a nation, the Parliament may appreciate what the policies are that deal with these things in the medium term. So at formulation stage, there's a window that of engaging Parliament when discussing or interrogating the medium-term expenditure frameworks. The approval stage, of course, is one of the traditional stages that people are very familiar with, in that the budget is presented to Parliament. So during this stage, at least Parliament has got the opportunity to check the priorities, and this can be linked with the strategies and other issues that relate to pandemics and crises. Those that, particularly those that are regularly happening, as we shall discuss later on in the presentation. And then there's an opportunity to reallocate funds, of course, at this stage. Then there's the implementation stage. When the budget is approved, then we see how the budget is being implemented through the scrutiny of in-year reports for those in those jurisdictions where these are produced and submitted to Parliament. And then committees can be proactive. They can be reviewing the budget on a quarterly basis, particularly the budget committees. This is something in our, as a case example, we've got our budget committee in the National Assembly of Zambia, which scrutinizes the budget in the first quarter and in the second quarter. And of course, there's also under this stage room for approval of supplementary budgets. And of course, the last stage is the audit stage, in which Parliament scrutinizes the reports of the Auditor General. And most Auditor General, most Supreme Audit institutions now have gone beyond just producing the regularity audits, which deal with the financial aspects, but now they've moved on to produce even performance reports, which looks at the value for money audits, as sometimes they are referred to. I now come to the issue of the main gist of the discussion, the crisis, accountability during a period of a crisis. Now, crisis comes in many forms and varying degrees of severity and location. Some of them can be a result of human activity, they can be natural, or even a combination of both. Particularly in the developing world, where we see a combination of natural and human activity being happening at the same time, particularly for diseases like cholera and whatever, which are a combination of the two. So the recent examples that we have that countries have faced in the recent past relate to the refugee crisis, particularly in Europe, which is as a result of wars and people running away from poverty. Then we have droughts, floods, wildfires, there are cyclones, all the time happening at the same time. Then we had the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. Some countries have faced serious debt issues. It becomes a crisis. For example, what happened in Greece fairly recently, including some big European countries, economies face this crisis. In South America, we also had Argentina facing similar crisis. Then we have the issue of disease. Africa has had a share of this, particularly with the Ebola outbreaks, and now we have the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic is quite unique in that it's the magnitude and scale is unprecedented, and including the economic and social effects that it has had are quite significant to deal with. So in terms of the accountability that comes, the accountability challenges that are faced, of course, naturally, when a government faces a crisis or a pandemic, they come up with measures to deal with this. And the measures may include some of the fiscal and monetary policies that we've been reading about, and some of them we experience in our own respective countries, of what the governments have, the various governments have done to minimize the impact of the COVID-19 effects. Now, usually huge amounts of resources are mobilized domestically and externally to deal with this crisis. Within the domestic economy, most businesses come up with all sorts of assistance to assist the government. Now, with this huge amount of resources that comes the challenge, the challenge of accountability. Depending on how the PFM, public financial management laws, are couched, this can be easily dealt with if the systems are straightforward. But Where there's an issue of weak institutions, this can be quite a challenge. The experiences, some of the documented experiences from what countries experience, particularly in Africa, when dealing with, for example, the Ebola outbreaks, point to certain reasons why the accountability challenges emerge. These include, the large scale spending, large scale, because there's a crisis, so there's need for more expenditure to deal with triggers rent-seeking behaviors in human beings. Then there's the issue of uncoordinated involvement of many actors. There'll be certainly many actors, and if these are uncoordinated, it creates opportunity for inefficiency and leakage in the use of utilization of resources. At the same time, because it's an emergency, it's a crisis, there's need for speed in implementing the interventions. But as you do this tends to result in certain public financial management regulation being relaxed, particularly those relating to procurement, those relating to accounting for extra budgetary funds. Remember that there will be so many donations, there will be so much aid that comes, but most of them will be outside the normal budgetary controls. So this becomes a challenge. And then, of course, there's the ex post verification. After everything has been done, the Auditor General still has to go through these documents in order to assist with just how whether they were in conformity with the financial regulations that are in existence. However, despite these challenges, there's still need for enhanced oversight during times of an emergency or a pandemic or a crisis, whatever we can call it. It does not mean that a crisis does not entail that the executive should have unfettered powers to do with the challenges. Of course, legislative bodies face the age-old dilemma that they are not specifically bodies that are built for speed action, but any emergency requires them to act with dispatch. So they may not be as fast, but in case of an emergency, we still require that legislatures should be able to run with what is currently happening. I'll give a specific example of how this is possible based on our experience here in Zambia. We have a provision that requires that if there is need to incur expenditure that is unforeseen and is in form of an emergency and it cannot wait for the normal parliamentary system to approve it. The provision the Constitution of Zambia has a provision which requires a parliamentary committee to approve any such excess expenditure within a period of 48 hours after it is presented to them. So under this, the president will issue a warrant to incur that expenditure that was not originally approved, but is necessary for the smooth running of the economy in terms of a crisis. So we see this window that has been created that Parliament can approve such expenditure within 48 hours. So that it is possible to work at this speed. However, the most important thing to that is that Parliament needs just to scrutinize the allocation of donated resources. They're quite significant in many cases. Not only that, like under the current debt service suspension initiative, there will be savings. There are savings that arise from the debt relief. So such savings need to be reallocated. And the parliament involvement in the reallocation of such savings becomes quite critical, because of course the competing needs are still many. So the reallocation of these savings becomes quite critical. So what mechanisms can members use, or what mechanisms can be used for this oversight in terms of a crisis? Of course, we've heard, and I'm sure this is the case in many countries, of these multi-sector approaches to deal with crisis. However, I think it's important to note that if Parliament is not involved, then these multi-sector approaches become incomplete, because Parliament is actually a main stakeholder. So this underscores why parliamentary oversight in terms of a pandemic like COVID-19 still remains critical. So Parliament needs to be a real-time player. At the same time, it also needs to be an expert stakeholder when dealing with the crisis. So when the crisis is being managed, Parliament needs to be involved in a way. Even post, when the crisis is over, we need to account of what we did and how the resources were dealt, how the resources were used. So some of the existing mechanisms, which are still very valid in terms of when faced with a crisis, includes the parliamentary committee system. We have questions that members can raise to the executive. Motions can be moved by members. The public can bring petitions to Parliament to take certain actions. So these are some of the mechanisms that are still very much valid and are in place in most parliaments. So my last bit is really to share on how can this oversight be enhanced. Firstly, after the 2008-2009 financial crisis, there was a heightened interest in establishment of specialized units within a parliamentary system, and even outside in the executive arm of government, particularly the independent fiscal institutions, for which the parliamentary budget offices belong. So there's need to establish or capacitate where these are already established, these offices and research units to assist members in their oversight functions. Then, of course, like I mentioned, Parliament needs to be an active player during a crisis, and it is important that parliamentary committees need to be more active during a crisis. And one of the issues that has been identified in which this can be enhanced is enhancing the capacity of committee clerks. Of course, members are also involved in there. Thirdly, there's need for more collaboration, closer collaboration with civil society organizations. These organizations usually conduct social audits and other social accountability exercises that can feed into the oversight function of Parliament. Here, just giving an example here, what the business community did in Zambia, they came together and formed a task force, which they called the Business Council COVID-19 Emergency Task Force. So this was made of various professional bodies and the business community to just assist the state deal with the COVID-19. Then there's audit institutions. The offices of the Auditor General also should conduct special audits on any program that the executive comes up with to deal with any crisis. Then lastly, any crisis resolution process needs to be transparent. All stakeholders should have access to information. We've seen a bit of, we've seen an improvement under the COVID-19 in that you see a regular update on the expenditure side of how much has come in and how much the government is spending during the crisis. But it's important that all institutions that are involved in dealing with this crisis make information available to all stakeholders so that through them, they may at least participate in the parliamentary processes. Yeah. Lastly, is that this oversight function of the executive function of the legislative oversight over the executive during a period of crisis needs to be codified. If there's any ambiguity in the role that Parliament can play, this will only tend to enhance the executive power. It will give more power to the executive to conduct certain programs, minus with minimal intervention by the executive. Moderator, I think I'll end here just to allow for more questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kateshi, for that lucid presentation. Thank you so much. Honorable members, as the presenter has already stated, now is your opportunity to ask questions, to make comments on that brilliant presentation. I'm happy you stuck to your time allocation, Mr. Kateshi.
I tried my level best. I really tried my level best.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Honorable members, now is your time to step in with your questions. Remember, Mr. Kateshi began with a quotation: do whatever it takes, but make sure you keep the receipts. What we've been you may come in, honorable member, if that is a question or a comment.
Yes, Chair. I'd like to submit a question. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm just wondering on the issue of the 48-hour turnaround time, which I find very interesting, honestly. I just want to find out if the parliamentary committees are the normal parliamentary committees that are exercising their oversight function on various ministries. Like in my country, we have the economic cluster, which oversights on finance, trade ministry, etc. So is he referring to these committees with respect to the committees that with respect to the ministries that they are overlooking? That's number one. And number two, I just want to assess the practicality of it, because during COVID-19, during the hard lockdown, it was rather impossible to move. And if the committees sit, granted now the lockdown is relaxed a bit, so that means physically we can meet and try to go through some documentation as far as government is concerned. But the practicality of it that I'm questioning is, like, for example, now we're meeting over Zoom. Some members are there, some aren't available. So how do we find that effective when the committees really have to get down to the nitty-gritties of the ministries that they are overlooking? That's number one. And number two, we've had instances where funds have been, and it's the same experience with most of us, I've realized, the misuse of funds. And I just want to assess the accountability aspect of it. How do we address it? Because in my case, Lesotho, we have not until today had a situation where we scrutinize the usage of the budget vis-a-vis COVID. And I don't think that is proper, or that is in line with how we should be doing things. What would be your advice? Thank you.
Moderator, can I proceed to answer?
Yes, with pleasure, Mr. Kateshi.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Member, for that, for those three. I think I picked out three issues in there, which I'll touch on. The first one related to, are we talking about the normal committees that we have, or we need to have an ad hoc or specially constituted committees? If time allows, specialized special committees would be the best, because Parliament would know, would have the privilege of constituting a team looking at the various capabilities of members to deal with a particular crisis. However, like I mentioned, we are faced with an emergency. So again, any delay in constituting a committee may support, a view that maybe Parliament slows down interventions. So the use of existing committees, depending on the type of crisis that we have, may be the best way to go. So if it's such the situation is that it needs an urgent intervention, then using existing committees would be the best, because constituting a specialized committee, you definitely need a bit of time. Now, there's the issue that when, during the hard lockdown, there was minimal physical contact. Yes, I admit that initially when all countries were trying to minimize the impact of COVID, we all, certain measures had to be taken. Of course, we suffered in the process, but I think with time, it has been realized now that we can use ICT platforms to do quite a lot now. A committee, once constituted or given the mandate, they can virtually meet and make a resolution. This is already happening, including passing a very important decision. Like I mentioned, when we had a warrant to deal with excess expenditure to deal with the COVID-19, the committee, when it first sat, they sat virtually, and the decision was made, and the executive was able to proceed, minus members physically meeting. So with time, we've learned how to conduct our business. Then thirdly, it's the issue of misuse of funds, and an example has been mentioned, like the case of Lesotho, where I think there was some emergency program to do with an emergency, and the funds were not scrutinized, the use of the funds. This is why I mentioned that there's need for Supreme Audit institutions to have the mandate to conduct special audit on such programs. I know that in our case, we have not seen one report, but there was a constant statements by the Auditor General that they were scrutinizing the donations as they were coming in and being utilized particularly by the Ministry of Health in dealing with some of the issues under COVID-19. So those were just statements. We haven't yet seen any report yet, but I believe that it will be out, which the Public Accounts Committee will definitely will scrutinize in detail. So I think the main important issue is that Auditor General's report, the Auditor General's office should have the mandate to produce specialized audit reports beyond the regularity reports that we are used to. Thank you. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kateshi. Honorable members, it's still your time. We're waiting for your comments and questions. In terms of the specialized report from the Auditor General, Mr. Kateshi, would you recommend a time frame? Because I think it would defeat the purpose for such an audit report to then get to Parliament, say a year later, when the new normal has become the normal.
Yeah. Yeah, the time available, the time in which Parliament needs to receive these reports is a very is cardinal to the whole issue of accountability. A delayed report definitely will not yield much because now the answers come through when we're receiving these submissions from controlling officers. They will accept that this thing has happened. However, the officers who were involved have since left the system. So what do you do now? So any delay will result in such responses. However, if I think if this can be done, probably in a period of not more than 6 months, that would be much helpful. If they can do in 3, that would even be better, because I know that in most countries, end of year reports, including our here, within after 3 months after end of the financial year, the accountant general is required to prepare the accounts for the main accounts of the republic within 3 months and submit this to the auditor general. Yeah, so if that for the whole system takes 3 months, it should be equally possible to zero in on a specific program and produce a report even much earlier than 3 months. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments, honorable members? I know it's a difficult time just after lunch. Well, I presume there are no more questions. I would like to thank you, Mr. Kateshi, for that brilliant presentation. We are now moving on to this slot that deals generally with the sharing of experiences by honorable members on budgeting and public financial management in respective countries. So we're still in plenary, honorable members. It's your time. Anyone in the executive to quickly check on our participants? Are we all back?
Honorable Chair, we have about 7 members present. We just lost one member. Hopefully they can connect soon.
I'm sure it's owing to the technical glitches. I'm trying to elicit responses, comments from my colleagues. Honorable members, are you there? On the question of budgeting in general, I realized that my country, Zimbabwe, was ranked the best country in terms of budget transparency in Africa. However, there is need to improve on public financial management and of course the question of corruption that keeps rearing its ugly head. The picture unfortunately isn't entirely rosy because, as I mentioned before, we have experienced budget overruns. We have also experienced quasi fiscal activities. And indeed, we have seen, particularly in relationship to the COVID outbreak, the emergence of unapproved expenditure. And the other worrying issue has been a budget that is divorced from reality. So those are some of the quick experiences that come at the top of my head in relationship to my country, Zimbabwe.
Chair, can I come in?
Yes, please, Honorable Tsepang, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was waiting for other honorable members to come in. First of all, congratulations to Zimbabwe for having attained that ranking despite the other challenges that you are relating to. But it's really commendable, at least on that. Yes. Now, coming to Lesotho, my case on issues raised or coming out of COVID-19, the emergence of COVID-19. I think we share a similar situation in the sense that there were some expenditure items that were irregularly, what's the word, but irregularly sought by government. And now that has brought us to a frustration because granted the process was irregular, but the suppliers of the services expect to be paid. And with everybody in a frustration of finances, this has created some havoc on, it has increased pressure on the government to be responsive to the needs of the people, especially the people that have served it in times of need. That is how it is voiced. And secondly, we had a change of government right in the middle of COVID, or right when everybody was very much frustrated with the COVID, the emergence of COVID-19, and it coming down to Africa and ultimately landing into Lesotho. So there was a change of government, and there were some promises and some financial obligations that the previous government had made. Now, with the incoming government or the change of government, these obligations, some of which were not necessarily in line with the financial procedures, they had to be carried over to the next government. And for a citizen looking from outside, they are not bothered who is coming in, who made a mistake. They simply want to be paid. That's number one, or rather that's number two. And then there was a body that was formulated out of legislated means. That was the command center, which was intended to address all the issues relating to COVID-19. And the formation of it has rendered it null and void, and all the processes that went with it. So that means all the services that were provided, there's a lot of scrutiny that has to go around that. But this new government, there was yet another body that was formulated to look around the financial, or rather anything that has to do with COVID-19. And that body as well has been dismantled because its formation was also not proper. So we have a very chaotic situation. The government, within our committees, we have not yet had a chance to scrutinize the usage of finances in the country vis-a-vis COVID-19. That is also a very huge dimension that we have to address as far as government is concerned. We have not even yet been able at all to do our proper oversight on the government funds, putting aside COVID-19. So that means there's immense pressure to actually get back on the ground and exercise our oversight role in making sure that the government funds are used in the interest of the people. And that is not happening when one is looking from afar. But our hands are sort of tied because there's so much business that is going on. And yes, I accept, as the previous speaker has just said, we shouldn't waste time and every cent must be accounted for. But it's very, very much difficult. During the COVID period, also, there have been some donations, there have been some funds coming in from all over the world. We've not yet had time to scrutinize and actually understand how much the government has received from whom and how the funds have been used. So it's quite a serious situation. And we also have now to start budgeting for next year. Everybody's jobless, everybody's frustrated. The country is, is dealing with serious issues of unemployment, and finances come at the top of that. That is my submission, Chair. Thank you.
Honorable Tsepang, are you still on? I must have lost quite a bit of what you said, but I'm sure the others were still connected.
Yes, Chair, you were having a sip of water. I just closed and said the frustration is about the financial situation in the country. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, it keeps kicking me out, but we will make do as it works in fits and good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I had been kicked out again. I'm sorry about that. Okay, good. Only the guys at the restaurant. Yeah.
Another one. Please, yeah, give me first. Because I see you going.
So what's the pressure now? It's on the
Yeah.
Chinunzi.
Honorable Chair, are you there?
Edna, can you hear me?
Yes, Chair, I can hear you. You may proceed.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry about the gremlins in our system here. I'm not sure if there was a reaction while I was gone to Honorable Tsepang's input. For our presenters, you may also feel free to come in and respond to some of the issues that honorable members are raising. Are there any more inputs from honorable members? Honorable colleagues, are you there? Any reactions from our secretariat?
Honorable Chair, we may proceed with the program. But before you give your remarks, Honorable Chair, I was just corrected by Aphrodad that the summer school will be held in Zimbabwe and not Zambia as announced, and therefore only honorable members from Zimbabwe at the SADC Parliamentary Forum will physically attend this event, and all other members will attend the event virtually. Honorable Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope honorable members have taken note. The summer school will be held in Zimbabwe and not in Zambia as announced earlier. If there are no more contributions from the other honorable members, this then brings us to the end of the meeting. Allow me, honorable members and distinguished participants, to thank you very much for your dedication, which has been shown through your commitment during this meeting. Allow me to extend my profound appreciation on behalf of the Standing Committee on Trade, Industry, Finance and Investment to our resource persons, particularly from Aphrodad and the Parliamentary Budget Office in the Zambian Parliament, for positively responding to this call. I wish to encourage you, our resource persons, to maintain this strong relationship that has been exhibited with the SADC Parliamentary Forum under the great leadership of our Secretary General. Honorable members, following the presentations and various engagements that have taken place during this meeting, we have remained with a duty of taking to our respective countries the lessons learned during this engagement. This engagement has re-emphasized our role in legislation oversight, including budget oversight and representation as members of parliament. This engagement has revealed that pandemics or crises such as COVID-19 and local focus with which some SADC countries are already experiencing require members of parliament to actively question government expenditure and ensure that every penny spent is in the best interest of the citizens of our respective countries. I therefore implore honorable members of this committee to extensively exercise their oversight role in budget oversight in order to ensure that budgets correctly reflect the needs of our people. B, to thoroughly scrutinize mining tax laws, development agendas so that our governments do not continue losing revenue through clauses. I'll take that again, I beg your pardon. Through secrecy clauses embedded in these agendas. C, ensure that our governments do not offer too many tax incentives, such as tax holidays at the expense of domestic revenue mobilization. D, see to it that government borrowing is done within the context of approved procedures and that the borrowing is within acceptable limits, bearing in mind unforeseen circumstances such as pandemics and crises. With these few words, honorable members, I wish to thank the Secretary General and all the members of staff at the SADC Parliamentary Forum for working tirelessly to ensure that this meeting is a success. Honorable members, I thank you. Merci beaucoup. Obrigado.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. If it's in order, I see Honorable Tsepang has indicated maybe should want to say something before we close.
Chair, should I proceed? Chair? Okay, Edna, maybe since the chair has already closed the session, we will take the opportunity of reading the comments. Thank you.
Honorable Tepang, the chair is trying to connect back. If you could hold on for a second. But the Vice Chair is present. Honorable Vice Chair.
I'm here, Edna.
The chair is back. Honorable Tepang has an issue to mention.
Yes, I said we may indulge. She may go ahead.
Oh, okay, Chair. Thank you so much. Apologies if I seem to be coming in when you have already made your remarks. But it's just a closing comment, Chair. First of all, may we please have all the presentations emailed to us? But the one of crucial importance is the observance is that maybe we are not participating because we are doing multiple tasks, and therefore it gives a false impression of our presence in the meeting. So if possible, maybe Chair would recommend that members show their live videos when we are attending meetings. And if one has an obligation outside, it would be nice to indicate that one has another commitment, so that at least you are able to determine who is present and not just making guesses if we are present or not. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I also felt that it's 1 or 2 or 3 members were really participating, but I wouldn't want to think honorable members would do the connect and move away kind of thing. But I really felt even our presenters were talking to empty chairs. I'm sure this is something that behind the scenes we'll take up together with the Secretariat to appeal to members, because this new normal might be with us for a long time to come. So it would not help members to keep speaking to empty chairs. But I am happy for those that were in attendance and those that showed active attendance. I thank you. May I bring or call this meeting to an end?
Thank you,
Thank you,
Honorable.
honorable members. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You are all invited to dinner.
The
Can you have
virtual
the
dinner.
vouchers? Can you have the vouchers, please?
Thank you for the virtual dinner.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. A lot. Lena.